Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Stronger Than Steel podcast, hosted by myself, John Keir, and my good friend, Austin Davidson. Today, it is Season 6, Episode 41, and, well, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 5-1 after a disappointing loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. Looking back at kind of what Mike Tomlin said going into this past week, talking about how it was not going to be lost on his team, that it was a big game for the Steelers going into Paul Brown Stadium with maybe not a must-win game, but in terms of realistically trying to be a part of the playoff picture or the AFC North, the Steelers were going to have to put on an impressive performance to be able to win, and we're going to have to put up a performance that would have been something that fans could have looked back on and said, even if they lost, they gave it their all. But instead, we get one of the more embarrassing blowouts in recent Steelers history, and one of the worst blowouts for the Mike Tomlin, Ben Roethlisberger era, and certainly the biggest loss to the Cincinnati Bengals for the Steelers in a number of years. The Bengals having now won 3 straight games over the Steelers since 1990, for the first time since 1990, dropping the Steelers to 5-1. And I don't want to hyper-focus a ton on one game. I know we'll recap this game, Austin, but given everything that went wrong, this 41-10 drubbing was just a massive failure and really just disheartening on all fronts for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it was just ugly. It's coming off an ugly defensive performance last week against the Chargers, and coming into this one and getting another ugly defensive performance. It's not good when your team is supposed to be relying on the defense to kind of, keep it in games, and now you're doing awful against the run and just you're not living up to expectations. I don't like the injury excuse. Like, the injuries shouldn't have been a factor in this game, because every team is injured. You look at Baltimore. Baltimore is messed up by injuries. Titans are messed up.
They'll laugh at you for talking about injuries. They've had more players on the injured reserve list than I think any team for the entire season.
Yeah, them and the Titans. Both are leaders in the AFC, and the Titans are coming down, but it's kind of fair. Their injuries are just they're mounting up and being bizarre at this point, but they're still winning games. They're finding ways to win games. Titans without Derrick Henry, the Ravens without Marcus Peters, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, all those guys, they find ways to win games. The Steelers are not. They're not performing. The next man up mentality is not here. The depth is in question, at least for me.
This team appears to be careening towards a 4th straight season with a collapse down the stretch, and we can get into the long-term ramifications of such a collapse once again. But when it comes to just this game, I just come out of it being so disheartened about their performance, coming off of what the coaching staff and players were talking about going into this one. They talked the talk coming into this week, and that's one thing. It's one thing to talk the talk, go out and lose a close game or put up a decent fight, but this team was dead from the moment the game started, giving up an opening drive touchdown. And even though they kept it somewhat close to the first quarter, and it was still a bit of a game, you never really felt like this team was going to be able to get things on the right track consistently enough. And I think a lot of it goes back to that formula we talked about for this team winning games, about how offensively they have to be able to run the ball successfully, they have to not turn the football over, and defensively it starts with stopping the run and getting turnovers on the back end, and nothing that the Steelers would typically need to win a game happened in this one. And even unlike and actually I was going to say, similarly to the last time the Steelers played the Bengals, it was just an avalanche rolling downhill, and unlike the last game where it was close for good portions of the game, this game was out of hand really early.
Yeah, when they were able to put up 10 points in the first and then a massive 21 in the second, this game was pretty much over very, very early. And the both the picks that Ben threw were both in the first half, and including the pick 6 to Mike Hilton, the first of his career. It put the Steelers in quite the bind pretty early.
So I know we probably don't have, there's not as much to say about a game like this when everything goes wrong, but where do you want to start with this one?
I guess we could start with the defense, because I feel like they weren't. I feel like they were the bigger problem in this game. They gave up 34. I guess you could argue 31 points.
It might have been the worst defensive performance I've seen from this team in a long time. And not from a straight-up raw numbers standpoint, because they gave up more to the Chargers a week ago. But in terms of successful play rate and just that feeling, that eye test of, can they get a stop when they need to in a certain situation? Can they make one play? And this was close to the Jacksonville Jaguars game in the playoffs a couple years ago, when I think we had recorded there was like one negative play for the offense in that game, something like that. And there were more for the Bengals in this one at the end in garbage time. But for most of the early part of this game, the Bengals were not having any negative plays, and it was just really easy for their offense, whether it was running the ball, throwing it short, or throwing it long when they wanted to. They could do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, there was no stopping them. I mean, you look at Joe Burrow's stats. He finished 20 of 24. That he was able to complete wherever he wanted. You look at Joe Mixon's stats, 28 for 165 with 2 touchdowns. He was able to run however he wanted. T. Higgins, instead of Jamar Chase, like last time, it was T. Higgins this time. The Bengals were able to do whatever they wanted on offense, and it felt like there was no stop. There was only one stop that comes to mind in my game. The only good thing by the defense was after Ben's first pick, where they held him on the goal line to 3 points. That was probably the best point for the defense, because I did not think they were going to hold there, but they were able to there. But that's it. That's like the only play that comes to mind where the Steelers actually did decently on defense. Obviously, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. The Bengals did end up punting, I think, 3 times in this game? 4?
They punted 3 times, but twice was their last 2 drives of the game when they were up by 31, so I'm not going to give them a pass for that.
Yeah, so there's only really...
They were playing backups at that point.
Yeah, there's only really one good defensive stop in this game, and it was after Ben's interception.
Yeah, and that really was the high point for the defense. And Mike Tomlin kind of summed it up pretty well when talking about everything that's going wrong with this defense, and he basically said, more or less, paraphrasing here, that if you can't stop the run, you can't really even begin to talk about other issues you might have, because that's the first step for a defense, is not allowing, at least for this defense, is not allowing teams to run the ball and run the ball successfully. And right out of the chute here, the Steelers gave up runs of 25 yards, 7, 6, and then an 8-yard touchdown from Joe Burrow. And the Bengals were consistently able to stay on track in this one, and as a result, they weren't putting Joe Burrow in situations where he had to drop back on 3rd and longs, or situations where he needed to hang on to the ball for an extra second. And even when that was the case, the Steelers weren't getting as much pressure as you would have liked. Cam Hayward getting double-teamed, TJ Watt getting chipped on virtually every play while coming back from injury. This team just wasn't able to get an advantageous situation on defense where they could have made plays. And it starts, of course, up front with the defensive line. They made that curious decision to scratch Isaiah Buggs and start Cam Hayward at nose tackle, which left Chris Wormley and friends, if you will, as the other defensive linemen. You saw a mix of Henry Mondeau and who else? Who else am I thinking of? Isaiah Loudermilk.
There we go. Yeah, I was trying to think. I was like, Isaiah Loudermilk actually played a bunch of snaps. I couldn't think of his name.
Daniel Archibong was the guy that the Steelers elevated in favor of Isaiah Buggs, and he played 5 snaps in the game. Just three of which came in, I think, the final 2 drives. So a little interesting to talk about Buggs getting sat down, and I don't know if you want to kind of start there, but just kind of surprised that happened. He's been a frustrating player, but Henry Mondeau is not a guy that can continue to see the field, and it sure looks like he is, but man, he's been tough to watch out there.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. I forgot to add a bit of Steelers news. The Steelers did end up adding a defensive lineman after this week, saying that they would make subtle changes. They'd be making changes. They added Montrevious Adams from the Saints practice squad, signed him to the active roster. But yeah, Isaiah Buggs getting benched was interesting. He's been an on and off player. He flashes that, like, hey, I can be a good defensive lineman, and then other times just like head scratching, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you even on an NFL team? He bounces between the two. I guess the inconsistency was just too much coming into this week, and they decided that the combination of using Henry Mondo, Cameron Hayward moving more towards the middle, and using Isaiah Loudermilk a little bit more would be the answer. It wasn't, but they tried it.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't like the idea. I understand that Buggs has been not performing as well as he can, not being consistent. And I guess from what I understand, a lot of it seems to be just a mental awareness kind of thing, where he's not lining up in the correct spot. He's not angled his body correctly. He doesn't know what's going on with the defense. So a lot of just issues with him shifting. And I guess the coaching staff just feels they can't trust him, and after 2.5 seasons, they're ready to pull the plug on him. I guess they just are not ready here to keep going with him. And even though Henry Mondo is a 285-pound defensive lineman and is getting moved out of whatever hole he's in because he's just undersized, the Steelers feel comfortable enough to just trot him out, I guess.
Yeah, I guess just feel better, because I think they like his practice squad, his special teams ability. Mondo does provide that. He was running down punts, which is interesting. I guess that's why they want him to be active more.
That doesn't explain defensive line.
That doesn't explain
play,
defensive line, yeah.
Look, we know no Stephon Tuitt, no Tyson Alualu has been a huge blow for this team, but I don't know. There's just I find it hard to believe that Isaiah Buggs couldn't have helped this run defense at least a little bit. I know it doesn't make the difference between winning and losing this game in all likelihood, but it probably would have helped at least a little bit to have a guy like that out there, even with his inconsistencies and all. Isaiah Loudermilk has been okay. Chris Wormley did not play well in this game after having a pretty good season to this point. And what do you think about Cam Hayward lining up at nose?
I thought I liked him better at his original position. I don't know. I thought it was all right, but I wasn't in love with it. I think taking a guy that's good somewhere and moving him somewhere else just usually isn't a good idea. When Cameron Hayward was playing great at the other position, it was all right, I guess.
It's a bit apples to oranges here, Austin, but I think a lot about what the Chiefs have been doing with Chris Jones. Are you familiar with what's been going on there?
Yeah, they moved him to defensive end, and it's stupid. It's been awful.
Yeah, so Chris Jones is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL. He's played like that for most of his career, right? Sometime, I think it was last year or this year, the Chiefs started moving him to edge rusher primarily, and he was a decent player there. He wasn't bad. He was, I'd say, slightly above average. But taking a player who's one of the league's best at a certain position and moving him to a place where he's not going to be that is not good for your football team. And now you see what the Chiefs have done. They get Melvin Ingram in the building, and he's playing pretty much at the same level Chris Jones was when he was playing on the edge. They move Chris Jones inside, and all of a sudden you've got a replacement level player on the edge, and you've got one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league now. So I'm not a huge fan of moving players when they are excelling at certain spots, but given the desperation this coaching staff seems to have for their run defense, I guess I understand why they made the attempt.
Yeah, it's understandable. Because at this point, it's where are you going to find someone to plug up that middle? You really wish that Fletcher Cox trade went through at this point. I obviously it was probably too much of an asking price, but if the Steelers wanted,
there's not a lot on the table here.
Yeah, there's not much you could do. The Steelers are grabbing at straws. As I said, they signed Montrevious Adams from the Saints practice squad, and I mean, it's a practice squad player. How much of a difference is that going to make? I don't know what the X was for Fletcher Cox, but that would have been a genuine improvement to put him at defensive tackle in the middle. I really miss Tyson Alualu. His contributions were very underrated.
Just goes to show you how important it still is to have interior defensive linemen.
Yeah, I'm not. I am on the PFF running backs don't matter train. I'm not there on the defensive tackles don't matter train.
Certainly for this team, with the way that they're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to the second level. I mean, we can talk a bit about the edge rushers. I thought Alex Highsmith was fine. TJ Watt was a bit quiet coming back from injury and now on the COVID-19 list. Not a whole lot going on from the outside linebacker group at this point. And inside, look, a lot has been said about Devin Bush, and I'm sure we can pile on him too. I'd say it's unfair that he's getting what feels like 90 to 95% of the criticism for the Steelers defense. However, it's also incorrect to say he's not a huge problem for this defense as well.
Yeah, it's a shame because he can't even be benched this week. I mean, unless you want to roll with Buddy Johnson or Ulysses Gilbert III, but
or Marcus Allen.
Oh, Marcus Allen. Yeah, I forgot about Marcus Allen. Yeah, so with Robert Spillane both hurt and on the COVID list, it's Devin Bush's show to lose. I mean, if he keeps playing the way he does, I mean, I think a change has to happen. But yeah, it's tough. He's just not in a good spot right now, and it really seems mental. Everyone keeps focusing on the injury, but he doesn't look slow out there. Or I mean, he doesn't look slow physically. He might be slow to react, but he doesn't look like an injury is. It doesn't look like he's being hindered by an injury. I'll put it that way. I mean, he could be thinking about it, like, oh no, I don't want to do this because what if I re-injure my knee or something? But he doesn't look physically injured. He really just is slow processing the game. He's not filling the correct gaps. He's just having a really tough time, and he's been an easy scapegoat for the Steelers defense that's just struggling as a whole because he is one of the guys that is sticking out on a bad defense, on a defense that's performing poorly, I guess I should say. There's not much you could do right now. Vince Williams said his confidence is shattered, and he's coming off a major injury, and Vince Williams put some blame on his coach not being available. Understandably, Jerry Oslowski saying because his wife passed, unfortunately. But I don't know. It was at first trendy to hop on hating Devin Bush, and now it's going the opposite. Now it's like, nah, you got to give him every pass in the world. I think that there's still a happy medium where you can give Bush some blame, but like the defense is just playing bad as a whole.
It's certainly fair to say that he's not the entire problem, but on a defense where if it's been missing a bunch of the guys it has this year, you drafted the guy to be able to make plays that he's not making. You drafted the guy to be able to cover tight ends and running backs. You drafted him to be that sideline-to-sideline guy. And I understand that he's undersized, and maybe that would never be the best part of his game, but he still needs to play downhill a lot better. He has taken this regression thing and gone from a player that was acceptable as a rookie, got a little bit better his second year, and has now fallen off completely. And if he would be where the Steelers had hoped that he would be, again, it doesn't change likely the Steelers winning or losing this game, but I would have to think that he certainly helps in their defensive effort in this one. Him being the liability that he's been has been a huge issue for this defense because he was drafted to be the Ryan Shazier replacement, and the Steelers are still searching for that. And after looking like he maybe not necessarily was on the right track, but at least had a good start to his career, he's been a massive disappointment. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, not much else could really be said. He's just been disappointing, and hopefully, I'm not sure he's gonna clean it up by the end of this year, but hopefully next year he could clean it up if he's on the team. I don't personally. I've pointed out a few times that I find Devin Bush a very hard person to root for. I have not gotten over the off-season shenanigans, so I don't. I kind of still root for Robert Spillane to come in and take the job, but I mean, it still would be a massive failure if the Steelers invested so much in Devin Bush for him to not be a starter, not be a good player on defense, not to be benched for a guy like Robert Spillane.
I've been saying for I've been saying since I think the Chargers game, maybe even a little earlier, that I think the time has come to sit him for a week, almost maybe a week or two, and just hit the hard reset button. Just have him focus on practice, have him focus on doing the simple things first. Because it's not just a matter of he's not making the big plays that they need him to. He's not making the routine plays either. He's not communicating well. It's like every level of his game is in shambles. And I understand that he's going through a lot right now, and I don't want to be insensitive to the fact that he's dealing with stuff, but at the same time, a lot of us are too. I mean, we've all got our problems. I don't know if it requires him seeing a sports psychologist or whatnot, but something needs to be done, whether it's pulling the plug, because trotting him out there is just, his play continues to erode. He played maybe the worst game of his career against the Chargers and then followed it up by playing maybe even worse last week. I think continuing to put him out there is just, it's not going to do anything good for him. And his confidence is shattered. You might not want to bench him because you're concerned about shattering it even more. But I'd say you're at the point now where you've got to consider doing something, because it's not looking good. You've got to be able to hit the reset button somehow. Just get him to start over and focus on just simple things first.
Yeah. If out of the three inside linebackers that are the choices right now, with Robert Spillane hurt, who would you want to see take Devin Bush's role if Devin Bush were to sit, assuming Spillane is not available for at least like a week or two?
Yes.
Yes, just mix them in. Just see who is capable and who's not.
Look, it's not ideal because you're facing the Ravens and Lamar Jackson this week. I don't think they could be any worse than what Devin Bush is at this moment. It's tough, man. It's really hard to watch. I've seen like the analysis, the psychoanalysis of Devin Bush. People have been talking about, like, does he just, people have been fairly questioning effort, and that's something that I think is often brought up as effort is something that's not really, that's a phantom excuse, but I actually think it applies here. And if a guy's not giving his whole effort, something's going on mentally where he just needs to take a seat. And that happens sometimes. We're all human. I just think that you throw anyone else out there, it might not be great, and it probably won't be, but you've got to do something different because it's not going to get better right now.
Yeah. I think Marcus Allen should probably get the first shot because he has the most
I would agree.
experience. Buddy Johnson has the highest investment by draft pick. Because I guess you could argue Marcus Allen has the highest investment because he's been with the team longer. But by draft pick, Buddy Johnson was a 4th round pick. Marcus Allen was a 5th, and then Ulysses Gilbert was a 6th, if I remember correctly. So
yep.
Probably would go that way. Ulysses Gilbert has also been with the team longer, so I don't know who would rotate in, but yeah, I think Marcus Allen should probably get the first shot since he has the most experience.
I think Allen and Gilbert were from the same draft class.
Yeah.
Regardless, the options are not great. There's not a lot to be excited about here.
No, it's similar to the defensive tackle room.
And that's definitely not good.
No.
But how could this team have foreseen, I mean, back in April, a lot of people are now doing the whole thing, well, maybe the Steelers should have drafted a defensive lineman. Let's remember that back in, April, no one thought the Steelers weren't going to have Stephon Tuitt, or, for that matter, David DeCastro this year. And neither of those guys have played a single snap. DeCastro having not, likely retired, and who knows what's going on with Stephon Tuitt, which, by the way, I know you pointed this out to me once, but I've seen a growing, vocal minority on Twitter that seems to be upset with Stephon Tuitt and or the Steelers for not disclosing what all is going on, which is, that's a bad take. They don't have to reveal any information about what's going on with him. The team is only obligated to tell the public what's going on with the injury report for that game going on, for betting purposes, not for anything else. So you're not entitled to know what's going on. The fact of the matter is, we'll hear about it at some point. That always happens. Remember when Marquise Pouncey kept having those ankle issues? We eventually learned he kept having issues that required him to have more and more operations. It all comes out eventually. The only important thing about it right now is that he can't play right now. And he's got to do what he's got to do. I don't know why that has to be such a negative thing where people are either attacking him or the team itself on Twitter for stuff like that. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, the man's been through a lot. It's just he's got an injury. His brother passed in the offseason. Like, it doesn't matter what's keeping him away. If he needs to be away from the football team, I trust that he's not ready to return, and we don't need to know why. I trust that he knows himself and the team knows him. If he's not ready to return, he's just not. Doesn't matter what the injury is or the problem.
I put this forward like a week or two ago, but I don't think he's coming back this year. And if you're talking about him realistically coming back to play in any games this year, he'd have to be activated or, put on the return from injured reserve list sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks, because we're running out of airstrip here.
Yeah, it's just not looking like it's going to be a this year kind of thing. Hopefully he doesn't step away from football, but it does not look like he is going to be returning this year.
Tyson Alualu, for that matter, 1 year left on his contract, but he could retire as well. Defensive line has been a position that if those guys were healthy, again, I said the Steelers had 8 defensive linemen that were NFL players, and even though you could argue about guys like Henry Mondeau being a fringe player, you also don't expect him playing 30 snaps a game, and that's what he's had to do recently. So I gave the Steelers a lot of credit for the depth that they had, but that just goes to show you how quickly things can change.
Yeah, that's tough. Oh, and one thing I wanted to go back to, this defensive line class was also ass. I don't think people remember that. Christian Barrymore was considered the best defensive tackle, and he did end up going pretty high to the Patriots, but they, as a whole, that he was the only first rounder, and he was a rotational guy. He was the guy that wasn't playing 100% of snaps for Alabama. Then, I can't remember the other one. It was Levi. He went to the Lions. He was from Washington. Onwuzurike, yeah. He went to the Lions, and he was a second rounder, and that was your second best guy, and he wasn't good either. I mean, it wasn't even something the Steelers were thinking about at the time, but on top of it, the defensive line class just wasn't very good.
Yeah, and there's not a ton of guys next year that have that Steelers 5-tech type build that they're looking for. You might have to, who knows what's going on. Well, we can get into that more another time, but it looks like at least Cam Hayward should still be around. We'll see about Stephon Tuitt or Tyson Alualu. At the very least, Isaiah Loudermilk looks like he could be a solid Chris Wormley replacement.
Yeah, there's some depth. There's stuff to work on. Depending on what the Steelers do at quarterback, they might have money to as well to try and add through free agency instead of the draft, so we'll have to see.
Back to the Steelers defense, what do you think about Joe Schobert's play? I think he's been okay. I know he's dealing with issues in front of him, and he's new to the team. I think he's an average linebacker at this point, and I'd be happy to have him back for the communication aspect next year.
Yeah, I think he's also okay. I don't think he's anything amazing, but he's the best inside linebacker we got, and he's all right.
Yeah, it would be quite bad if the Steelers did not have him. On the back end, though, again, a group that was not tested all that much, but just gave up plenty of underneath routes, and the Bengals were able to convert when they needed to. And when they went deep, a 32-yard pass over James Pierre to T. Higgins, the Steelers made an effort to take away Jamar Chase, and he was just 3 for 39. But T. Higgins, 6 for 114, and absolutely embarrassed James Pierre on a touchdown pass that really just basically just encapsulated what this whole game was about.
Yeah, I miss having healthy cornerbacks. It's tough. I miss having good cornerbacks. I mean, the team could really use a Steven Nelson or a Mike Hilton right now. What would you rather have, $8 million or Mike Hilton and Steven Nelson together? The Steelers said...
I'd like to have one of them.
Yeah, the Steelers said, we'd rather have $8 million. Thank you, goodbye. And Mike Hilton graded out as the best defensive player on this weekend. Got his first pick 6. He's doing good over there. Steven Nelson is just doing all right, but he's on a $3 million contract. So sorry, $9 million. The Steelers elected for $9 million over those two so that they could they could use Arthur Millette, Trey Norwood instead.
That's different though, because they had Nelson under contract. That's the thing that always gets me. They never had to do anything with Nelson.
This is true. But cutting Nelson
that's
saved $8 million.
Okay. The whole Mike Hilton thing leaving, I'm not as upset about, but I have always been frustrated with the Steven Nelson thing, just because I thought that's a guy you really would have liked to have had, and in this game, I think again he would have made a difference. We can get into the conversation about the way this team was constructed in a little bit, but I mean, just issues on every level of the defense. Mike Tomlin and staff playing conservatively, and tackling the catch, not getting beat over the top, which works until you get beat over the top. And too many times this season, including twice against the Bengals now, the Steelers have played to not give up the big play, and they still did in a game where nothing else went right.
Yep. Just continuously bad performances from everyone on the defense in back-to-back games, for the most part anyway.
And the cherry on top of the shit sandwich has to be Minkah Fitzpatrick finally getting his first interception of the season, only for it to immediately go the other way.
Yep.
What a waste. Wasting that pick.
Of course. It really just feels right. It felt right for the game.
Feels right for the defense this whole season. A unit that had been one of the league's 2 or 3 best over the last 2 seasons has forced just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 turnovers this year. And that magic number of 25 seems almost impossible to reach with 6 games left.
Yeah, you're going to have to pull some magic. You're going to have to hope for
a 9-burger.
Yeah, the Ravens game's going as they've been the past few times, where it's like there's 3 turnovers, and really you need more than that. You need it to go better. You need to get like 4 turnovers in each Ravens game.
You need to average just under 3 per game for the final 6 games, which is just not going to happen.
No.
I mean, if they did, they'd probably win a lot of their games, but that's just not happening. This defense just has issues, and they were on full display in this one, and there's not a lot. Stephon Tuitt and Tyson Alualu are not walking through that door. So, on the other side, it's been what it's been for the Steelers' offense all season. This game was very reminiscent of the first Bengals game, just from the standpoint of if you can't run the ball successfully and you're in an early deficit and you turn the ball over, this offense is not going to produce. You can win games, as we've been saying all year with this offense, and they had a formula that was working for them in the middle of the season, and including the game against Buffalo, but you just need a lot to go right, and not only did not everything go right in this one for the offense, nothing went right. I mean, this team did not run the ball successfully. Just 7 of 15 on rushing attempts were successful, which is 47%, which is not terrible. But then you realize that 2 of those successful runs came on the final drive when the game was well within hand. This team was struggling to get anything, and these weren't just successful runs. This was a 2nd and 4 becoming a 3rd and 2. These were not big runs. This team just offensively speaking, the game plan again, coming out in heavy personnel and running directly into the Bengals' heavy front, which the Bengals respond to heavy on offense by going even heavier. So the Steelers used it as a dick measuring contest and lost again. So I run out of things to say about why this team continues to do puzzling things on offense there. And then beyond that, they can't push the ball down the field successfully often enough, and the offensive line can't protect Ben enough when he has to throw it a bunch, and he doesn't make enough big plays. And Chase Claypool, which we can talk a whole bunch about him in this one, but just all in all, when that formula isn't going well, this team cannot move the ball on offense. And in this one, I wanted to give a shout out to Alex Kozora of SteelersDepot.com, who put together a YouTube video. I don't know if you saw this, Austin, but there were 10 plays where there was some sort of thing going wrong with the offense, whether it was Trey Turner and BJ Finney pulling into each other, running into each other. Pat Freiermuth and I want to say James Washington or Deontay Johnson basically running routes directly on top of each other, where one of them was the first read, so Ben can't go there because there's 2 defenders immediately on top of both of those guys. So he has to go to his third read, and there's just nothing to do. Basically, 10 plays of the Steelers, I want to say 60 plays on offense, were blown up by some sort of missed assignment, some sort of confusion going on, and just a ton of mental mistakes that really just make you shake your head. And when you're having issues on that many plays, 10 out of 60 plays, yeah, it's no wonder they only scored 10 points.
Yeah, it was a rough outing from everyone. The play you're referencing, it sucked too, because Deontay Johnson got open right after Pat Freiermuth and him ran into each other. But it was just already too late. Ben saw that there was a mistake. He was like, all right, I got to go somewhere else. But, yeah, as a whole, the offense just kind of, they stink. There's nothing different. It's nothing different from the beginning of the year. The Chargers game was interesting. The Chargers game showed that there was a possibility to put up more than, put up 30 points or more, but it's just not. It's not something that's going to happen every game. It's not going to be something that happens every 4 games. It's not going to be something that happens every 7 games. It was a fluke, and it's just like the offense as a whole just sucks. And I'm really disappointed. My biggest disappointment so far on offense, because I know what to expect from Ben Roethlisberger at this point. I know he threw 2 picks and he hasn't thrown a pick in several weeks, but this has been luck. That it's been dropped picks. That's fine. So it's not like I was expecting. Luck didn't go his way this game, so it was nothing I didn't expect. Najee, I'm not expecting much more.
He's dropped a few passes too, by the way.
Yeah, not the best pass catcher. James Washington is the guy that I'm really disappointed with. I was really hoping that he would finally get a role and he'd finally take over, but he's going to go down as one of my worst draft misses. And from the wide receiver position, that hurts. It's like one of the worst spots I have. He's just not very good. He just can't create separation. And I don't think it's exaggerating to say anymore. I think Ray McCloud provides more to the offense than James Washington. I don't know if that's a hot take. I don't think James Washington provides anything. He can't get open. He just really struggles. He's a guy that's been thrust into a role, and people are talking about he was going to break out and finally get there, and he just hasn't gotten there. Been waiting for a breakout from him since he got drafted, since I thought that, hey, he might be the best wide receiver in the class that he came out of. It's tough. I think out of everyone, I'm most disappointed with him. 1 catch for 3 yards on 2 targets when you're a starting wide receiver now, when there was a good amount of hype about you getting a role. It sucks. Should have traded him at this point. At first I thought that no, the Steelers need the depth. It's just like, what is he providing? I don't know if there was any offers for it, but Anthony Miller looked the same. It's just like Anthony Miller, at least on his 2-yard catch, did something spectacular with it. So I don't know. I think James Washington to me has been the most disappointing out of everyone. Not the worst. Definitely not the worst. It's just most disappointing.
So you blame a lot of his issues on him and not as much on the way he's being used?
No, I blame it on him. I mean, the
Steelers have been putting him in the slot this year, even though he had never done it before.
Yeah, but he's never broken out any other year either. And with Mason Rudolph, without Mason Rudolph, with Ben, without Ben, in a certain position, when not a starter, when a starter, there's nothing that he's not going to break out. It's just not going to happen.
Not with this team, anyways.
No.
I actually have this feeling that he's gonna play a lot better for whatever team he's with next year.
That'd be good for my ego. I'd take that. But
I still think he's a solid receiver. I just don't think I think the way this team runs its offense is not conducive to him.
Yeah,
to be quite honest with you.
That's fair.
And there's no downfield element with this team, really. And we talked about issues with this team creating routes to get guys open, and a lot of them are independent of each other. There's one guy in this team that can do that. And again, he doesn't play in the slot, so he can't be the Juju or Pat Freiermuth type of player. So when that happens, there's not a whole lot for you. So I wouldn't give up quite yet on him overall, though I would say I will say on January 9th, when the Steelers season ends up in Baltimore, he'll have had his bags packed in Pittsburgh at Mason Rudolph's house after he has already moved out of his apartment. After the game ends and the team wraps up at their locker room day the following day, he'll go to Mason's, grab all of his stuff, and be on the first flight out of town.
Yeah,
he's done here.
Yeah, he's gonna go somewhere else.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of issues. Deontay Johnson had nice numbers in the end. He got open consistently in this one. A lot of those numbers came after the game was in hand. Chase Claypool had a nice grab in this one, a couple nice plays. Also had a bunch of terrible plays, including a drop when he was wide open and could have had maybe a double explosive play after he called for the ball, mind you, and had a play where he ripped off a Bengals player's helmet and took a penalty. It was another game for Chase Claypool that shows just how disappointing his season has been, because you see 3 for 82 and a 41-yard grab. You know what he's capable of, and he just doesn't get it done enough.
Chase Claypool is what everyone wants Juju Smith-Schuster to be. Like, everyone doesn't like Juju Smith-Schuster because of his personality and everything, but Juju Smith-Schuster isn't like that bad. Chase Claypool is what everyone thinks Juju is. I saw someone tweet that. I don't know who said that. I wish I could credit them. But I was
That's definitely true, though.
That it is true. Chase Claypool is an idiot. He's a young guy. I can't call him a young kid because he's our age. Like, he's an idiot with money, and he does stupid things on the field, off the field, both, and it's frustrating. On top of it, I've said it before, I'll say it again, he has the worst contact balance of possibly any wide receiver in the NFL. He cannot stay on his feet to save his life. Sometimes he'll make the catch in the process, even though he can't stay on his feet, but worst contact balance out of any wide receiver I've seen on the team in years. Just years. He really struggles to stay up and on his feet. But
which is really impressive considering we saw Johnny Holton in this offense once.
It's true. Johnny Holton, at least when he got targeted, didn't fall to the ground, I guess. Even though he couldn't catch it, but he wasn't falling on the ground. Yeah, not much else could be said about him. Chase Claypool is just a really frustrating player on and off the field.
We can get to the off-field portion, but his catch percentage is dropping this year. Only 1 touchdown this year after scoring 11 a year ago.
Including 4 in one game.
Yeah, I was actually going to say not long after that game is kind of where he started to cool off, and there hasn't been much since then. I understand that having a better quarterback probably helps him, but you've got to be able to make more plays. He was drafted to make plays down the field, and he doesn't make plays like that at all. At least not nearly as consistently as he should. He only makes them once out of every 8 times instead of once out of every 4. He is probably the player that's frustrated me more this year than anyone else on offense, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, that's fair. He really came down from last year.
What else? Najee was disappointing in this one. I know not a lot of it's his fault, but it's funny that last game against the Bengals, he caught 14 passes? Yeah, he caught 14 for 102. Excuse me. And this week just 3 for 14. I do feel like the Steelers did a good job in managing his reps, though, in this game. I know part of it was just the game getting away, but I think they're starting to understand the importance of giving him a little more of a breather. And just realizing in a game like that, it doesn't matter if Kalen Ballage and Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland combine for 7, 8 touches in this one because the game was just out of hand. But there's just not enough from this offense, whether it's big plays or anything to help protect their old quarterback. We've said it all year. The path for this team to succeed was the 2015 Denver Broncos, and honestly, their quarterback now is better than Peyton Manning was then. But you still need a lot to go right. You've got to be able to run the ball well. You've got to be able to make big plays when you need to. You can't turn it over. And defensively, you've got to turn the ball over. And you just can't get beat consistently. And there's just too many issues for this team to make a run like that. So, do you want to touch on anything else, or do you want to get into the bigger picture thing here? I guess we should touch on special teams quickly here.
Yeah, we could talk about special teams. Special teams didn't have that much going on. The Steelers had to replace Ray McLeod, who was on the COVID reserve list. They used Anthony McFarland for kick returns, and then they did the rare putting a defensive player on returning on punt returns. It was Cameron Sutton.
First time since 2007.
Yeah, it's been a very long time. When Cameron Sutton was first drafted, he had that possibility from Tennessee, but never really got to see it. Put him in now, which honestly I wasn't a big fan of. I thought they should have just elevated Steven Sims and had him do it, because I mean Cameron Sutton was your cornerback one for this game. Not ideal to have him out there on punt returns, even though the Bengals did not have to punt that many times. Still just not. I wasn't excited about it, but it worked out. It was fine, I guess. Chris Boswell continued doing his thing. He hit his field goal. He hit his extra point. He should be on his way to a Pro Bowl, as Tyler Bass had a really bad week, I think 2 weeks ago, where he missed 2 kicks and kind of put Chris Boswell as the second kicker behind only Justin Tucker. And then punting, Harvin just continues to be meh. He's all right. Do you have anything to add?
Just the circle of sadness continues to spin.
Circle of sadness does continue to spin.
All right. Well, in the big picture with this team, Austin, they are 5-5-1. There's still obviously a path to them making the playoffs, though it certainly seems less optimistic now than it has all year. At the same time, I'll also say it also looked pretty bleak at 1-3, and they ripped off 4 straight wins. This team has surprised us before. Is it outrageous to think that they could turn it around, at least to a certain degree?
No. It's gonna...
No, it's all hope is lost.
Oh, I'm sorry. I answered that wrong. Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. No, not all hope is lost. I answered the question wrong. There's definitely a path. If it starts with this next game against the Ravens, this Ravens game is a must-win game. If you could still find a way, if you could return... I was so much more confident about it about 4 weeks ago, where I was like, yeah, the defense can return back to form. I was like...
You said it on this very podcast, we're sweeping Baltimore.
The Steelers are sweeping Baltimore. I don't feel as comfortable saying that anymore.
Do you?
I think understandably after these 2 bad defensive performances and not being able to get the turnovers, but they can still do it. I mean, the NFL isn't a transitive property. Like, if one team beats another team, you're not guaranteed, and you beat that team, you're not guaranteed to beat the team that originally got beat. But the Ravens really struggled with the Browns. And Lamar Jackson threw 4 picks, or I think he had
yes,
4.
He threw 4.
Okay, I didn't know if it was 4 turnovers or 4 picks. And I mean, a lot of in the few games the Steelers have against Lamar Jackson, the reason that they were able to win was because of those. I mean, there is some hope, because one of those games, the Ravens ran all over the Steelers. It was just like these past 2 games against the Bengals and the Bengals and the Chargers, where they ran all over the Steelers and did what they want, and the Steelers still won. It was an outlier, because I forget what the exact number of rushing yards was, but it was the only time the Steelers had given
265.
Okay. Yeah, so it was the only time the Steelers gave up that much and won the game. But that could give you hope that if they're able to get the turnovers, that they could still win it, even if they get ran all over. I mean, it's going to take a lot, but it starts with this next game. There is hope. If you could still sweep the Ravens, there is a chance in this division.
You pretty much have to. Your best chance at the division now, I mean, you obviously have to win against the Ravens this week, but you have to win the last 3 games of the division, finish 4-2. And then you need to make sure hope that Cincinnati doesn't finish ahead of you. Obviously, it's easy to say it starts with this week, but if you can win games against Baltimore and Tennessee, that'll leave you in a good spot. And obviously, we'll have a quick turnaround with the Vikings next Thursday night too, which will be interesting too. But
they're scary.
Realistically speaking, I have a hard time thinking this team is going to be anything better than 7-9-1 right now, to be honest with you.
I feel like destiny is asking for them to be 8-8, just so that it could continue being said Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, and it'd be because they went 8-8-1. I feel like it's destiny.
I will say, usually when teams get blown out in the fashion the Steelers did last week, you certainly don't see them get blown out again, at least not a team like Pittsburgh. I think they've got a decent chance to surprise people next week, but all in all, the issues on the defense, like we said, there's no quick fix to them. It's just guys need to play better. And against a team like Baltimore, are you really hoping that they can... Are you really expecting, after they've given up 229, 159, 198 rushing yards the last 3 weeks, they've only forced 2 turnovers. One of them was a ball that Justin Herbert threw at Cam Hayward's helmet. So, yeah, you've got that to take into account. All these issues for the offense where there's no quick fix. It's not impossible, but they need a lot to break their way. And I think it's far more likely that the Steelers finish 5-11-1 than they do make the playoffs, as sad as that is to say. And again, I don't want to take too much from just one game, but the problems here are not going away. But there is hope from the standpoint of a prideful team with a lot of history. And we can kind of get into now the pride, the Steeler way and whatnot, and what all happened with the way that this team got called out by a lot of former players after the game.
Yeah, it was a tough week. Tough week after the loss. Had to sit with that. Then a bunch of Steelers said, "This sucks. The culture sucks. The locker room you have right now sucks." And that includes Ryan Clark, Rocky Bleier, Ramon Foster, Alan Faneca, Arthur Motes, Vince Williams, Charlie Batch, and more. Not all were just commenting on like the culture. Some were commenting about specific players like Devin Bush.
Like Ryan Shazier.
Yeah. Oh, and Ryan Shazier was another one. But basically, a lot of former Steelers ripped into the team and said, "This team is unrecognizable from when I was playing. This team doesn't look good. This is different. They're just really bad, and they need to get their shit together." And Chase Claypool did not help the situation because some of it was spurred by him, because he was asked what the Steelers could do to perform better in practice, to what they could do at practice to get better. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly how it was phrased, but he said adding music to practice would be the answer to help the team. This is why he's stupid. It's just he's really, really stupid. The team did not need that kind of answer saying, "Oh yeah, we need to listen to music to practice better." That is not a professional answer. That is a high school. You're doing your high school newspaper's interview, and that was your answer. Like that's just a.
He used that key word too, fun. Make practice more fun. When you use that key word, it's like a tag that's left in like a YouTube video or something. People search for that and find it, and certain people, you know who, will just take that and run with it.
Yeah, and to a point, it's fair. I mean, it's really stupid.
For this, yeah.
It's really stupid.
It's one thing if you're coming off a game where maybe you lose 41-38 in overtime. You'd still see people complain about it. Or if you're coming off a win, but to not just lose by 31 to the Bengals, but to lose in a game where they needed this game. It was, I wouldn't call it like a legacy game, but it's potentially a game that defines their season, and they were never in it from the start, and they got their shit kicked in by a team that they've pretty much dominated for the past 20, 30 years. And to have that happen, and then to come out and say this, is just, the lack of self-awareness is just appalling by Chase Claypool. And like you said, it's just something that they didn't need. And I understand that the answer itself is probably a bit innocent, and he might not have just been thinking about it, but you have to understand. And especially because, the response to this is, if you can't practice better or get up for a game that you need to win after getting the doors blown off by 31 points, you don't belong in the league, is essentially the response to that.
Yeah, and that's fair. Just they need to be better, and there has been a lot of pointing at the practice. This isn't the first time that we're hearing about practice is an issue. Regardless of, Chase Claypool is stupid and said that fun is an issue, but Joe Schobert said that they needed to practice harder. Minka Fitzpatrick said that they had to practice harder. There are people in this locker room that they're they're not a unified locker room. Right now, there are people that are not giving full effort, and they're not going to expose who those people are, but they're saying
Devin
it.
Bush.
Yeah, probably, but they're being passive aggressive with it and saying we need to be better, and some people need to give full effort in practice. Probably Devin Bush, probably more than just him though. There's probably other people as well, but the practice has just been a problem. Apparently, this locker room is just not taking it seriously.
Joe Schobert said Mike Tomlin took the floor this week and followed that by pads popping practice. So there was padded practice this week. So Tomlin was very loud. He said Cam Hayward is also going to be talking. TJ obviously wasn't in the meetings, but during the games, talking loud, making himself known. Coach Tomlin pretty much took the floor for the meetings this week. I'm not going to comment on anyone else's play, Schobert said. Yeah, so it's put up or shut up time, Mike Tomlin said earlier this week. Ben Roethlisberger said if you guys have to give a message at this point in the season, maybe it's time for us to get different guys. Wow, even Ben is saying that. Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a tough week.
Yeah. I don't know where you want to point to as far as the whole issues with it. I don't know if I'd go so deep as to say it's a culture problem, because it's a big thing that goes on with a lot of teams. You hear stuff like this, but I think it's convenient to say that stuff like this is happening after a loss like that, but it's understandable given the conditions that they're facing right now. They have to play better next week. If this is a true Steelers team, they will come out and they may not win, but if they come out and they give it their all and they go toe-to-toe with the Ravens for the whole game or maybe overtime, that's, I think, is more so what these guys are looking for, not even necessarily winning, because it's not just about winning or losing. It's about the way that they lost. It's about the embarrassment that they represent all these former players in the city and the fans, and they didn't just let them down. They were completely embarrassing in the process.
Yeah. Hopefully it only gets better from here. Hopefully all this resonates with the locker room currently, that all these former Steelers, some really recent, like Vince Williams is not out of the locker room very long at all. Just hopefully this resonates with some of the guys there now, and they just play better down the stretch. They use this as motivation. They shouldn't have needed it as motivation, but it would be even more embarrassing that after this they just continue just playing the way they are.
In your opinion, is it more of a culture issue or is it a talent issue?
Probably talent at the moment. If we're talking about more, I think it is talent. The next man up mentality I touched on it when we first started is just not. The guys that have had to step in just haven't been playing very well, and they're just not talented enough to make up for it. Like James Pierre has gotten to his starting role. The nose tackle situation. Chris Wormley's doing all right, but he's not Stephon Tuitt level. Just all of that all together, combined with Devin Bush not looking like he looks like he lacks any sort of talent. So,
well, the talent's there. He just lacks the want to for him, anyways.
Yeah.
Well, where do we go from here, Austin?
We go to Baltimore. We go to Heinz
Did you want to touch on the coaching aspect of players being left in the game?
No. I do think it's stupid, but they have their mentality. They wanted to do it as sort of a practice punishment thing, like you guys need to be in there for these reps because you guys suck. I view it differently. I would have taken it to practice, but instead said, hey, you guys sucked. Let's practice harder, which they did that as well, but I wouldn't have risked injury to prove it, to say, hey, you guys sucked, you need to be in there because you need reps.
That explains why when they were down by 30 points, instead of doing hurry up and throwing the ball down the field, they were running hurry up and running receiver screens and running the ball.
Mm-hmm. Classic.
Yeah. Just not a lot that makes sense there. All right, well, there's still 6 weeks left, and we'll see what kind of guts this team has, Austin. We will see, won't we?
Yep. Definitely finishing 11-5-1.
After they sweep Baltimore, of course.
After they sweep Baltimore, of course. That is the only guarantee in life. Death, taxes, and sweeping Baltimore this year.
Yikes. All right. Do you want to touch on anything that happened last week with the NFL?
Trying to see quickly if there's anything that was really fun. The only thing I want to say is that the 49ers made me eat my words. I was so annoyed by that. I was like, why are the 49ers even favored in this game? I don't understand. And then they made me eat
Vegas
my words.
knows what they're doing.
Vegas does know. I should have trusted them more. I did not understand that. But other than that, no, I already talked about the Thanksgiving games on the preview episode before the Bengals game, so I'm pretty good.
All right, want to touch on Thursday Night Football really quick?
Sure. So the Cowboys are at the Saints. The Saints are without Alvin Kamara again. They're without both their starting offensive tackles. Very injured team.
Taysom Hill is starting, by the way.
And Taysom Hill is starting. And Dallas is favored by 6 points. Excuse me. Sorry, I got the sneeze. I'm going to go with Dallas to cover. And this is... I don't know if I've done this yet, but I'm picking this as my lock of the week. I'm picking the Thursday Night Football as a lock. I like to do a thing now when I type out this stuff where I try and guess the line before I saw it. I thought this line was going to be at minus 10. And then I saw it was at -6, and I was like, "Oh wow!" Because this was after the news that Alvin Kamara wouldn't be playing. Mark Ingram is back. I should say that. So they still got a running back, but I do not like that. I think that spread is a little too little for what the Saints are missing. So give me Dallas to cover, and that's my lock. What do you got for the game?
The Saints have not won a game since Halloween. That was the game where Jameis Winston went down and was out for the year. They've lost 2 close games to Tennessee and Atlanta, but they've been blown out in their last 2 games. Even getting a full week here, I don't know if I can roll with them. They're just a team in free fall right now, and like you said, all the injuries, it's hard not to pick Dallas here, so I will take the Cowboys here as well.
All right. I think we are done today, unless there's anything you got to add.
Nothing that comes to mind. Let me do a quick check of Twitter, see if there's anything exciting going on. Anything going on with you right now?
Not that I see. Oh! Do you want to do the trivia?
Oh, yeah. It's your turn, so I have to go now? Was there going to be something out of this? Like, you get to pick the lines first if I don't get it right or something?
No, I don't think so. We did at least.
Oh yeah, it was just going to be for fun. That's right.
Yeah. We could save it for next week if it's better, because I still for the next episode.
All right, why don't we do it for the next episode then?
That works. All right, but I remembered it. I'll remember it for next episode to write it down. Well, not question, but
well, I was going to say make sure you have it ready.
Yeah. All right. Perfect.
Alrighty then. Well, as always, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with Austin Davidson and John Keir. We appreciate you stopping by and listening to our takes on the Pittsburgh Steelers' 41-10 loss to the Cincinnati Bengals and everything that has happened this week since then. We'll be back later this week to talk Steelers and Ravens Part 1. In the meantime, you can check out our episodes posted on YouTube under the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast, and of course you can check out our new home for the podcast, anchor.fm/Stronger Than Steel, and we're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as well. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Have a good night.
Goodbye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.